Hi, folks, and welcome back to MMA Talking Heads, hosted on MMA Mania. I'm your host, Jason Probst. Now, here on this week's of Talking Heads, we have a special host, longtime friend of me and of the show, Danny Acosta. Danny, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good, man. We're glad to have you aboard. Folks, if you're familiar with Danny's work, you've seen him as a regular contributor to MMA Junkie, the MMA editor of the Wellverse.com, and also contributes regularly to Sirius Fight Club Radio on Tuesdays. Was that Tuesdays, Danny? Did I get that right?
Tuesdays, 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, Sirius 92, XM 208.
Nice. You see, people have so many credentials I can barely remember. But that's the point of the show. So we're leading into UFC 157 this weekend, Danny. Big move by the UFC to put Ronda Rousey in. Not only a women's fight, but a main event at UFC 157. What are your thoughts behind this move? The UFC basically, are they going all in on women's MMA here?
No, they're not. They're dipping their toe in the water, but they're hedging their bet with Ronda Rousey. If you're going to put your best foot forward when it comes to female mixed martial arts, Ronda Rousey is it. I mean, how many fighters have a finishing hold? She essentially has that with her first round armbar. Not just an armbar, but a first round armbar. And I think it's a matter of Ronda Rousey sells tickets. That's the perception behind her, and they're really putting it to the test here, putting her on the main event of a card that features two former champions in the co-main event. I mean, it's a big move. I think that Ronda Rousey would have been perfect for Fox or perfect for any kind of free television, but putting her on our pay-per-view is somewhat of a gamble, and I think the UFC is counting on that to pay off.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit, even if maybe they don't get the kind of sales, it still kind of gets them, I mean, for lack of a better word, the street cred among the hardcore MMA fans, because even, I don't think a lot of people are going to knock them if it doesn't meet whatever the sales expectations are. They're putting her in a main event, and, God forbid if Rousey loses, I mean, a fight is a fight. But I think it's kind of a thing where maybe they can really kind of make their mark with Rousey. Let's say she comes out and, as you stated, does the trademark first round armbar, probably wouldn't be a bad thing if you had a gruesome sequence like the one she finished Miesha Tate with, right? What do you do with her next? Do you fight her 2-3 times a year, maybe every 6 months? I mean, what do you think they'll do if she has the signature Rousey performance Saturday night?
I think you could have Rousey fight 2 or 3 times a year. Honestly, I don't think it matters so much how many times Rousey fights a year. More so, how many women are going to be on cards in the future? Are they only going to do the 135 division? Will this be strictly the Ronda Rousey show after UFC 157? I think there's a lot of interesting questions this brings up. I think bottom line, the UFC is counting on her to break into a new market. People don't realize that the UFC, their current audience is over 25% female. I think the UFC is really trying to amplify that. And really, when you look at Rousey versus Liz Caramoche, it's a perfectly crafted PR fight. When it comes to public relations, there's a lot of firsts here. It's the first female fight in mixed martial arts, or in the UFC history, rather. It's the first headlining pay-per-view for females in the UFC. It's the first openly gay fighter with Liz Caramoche. And there's just a lot of great things. It's also the first female Olympian. That's something that Ronda Rousey brings to the table. It's the first female Olympian in the UFC. So a lot of firsts here. And I think the UFC getting Time Magazine, getting Esquire, and on all these features behind Ronda Rousey, it's mainstream media that hasn't really been with the UFC is really curious about Ronda Rousey. And I think that's why they're putting such a big push behind this.
Yeah, I think that's a great part, too, is really pointing out the mainstream media. In addition to Time and Esquire, I believe tomorrow, Tuesday, HBO Real Sports is going to have a segment on Rousey as well. So, those are whole new venues. And that's one thing, I got to credit the UFC. They've always been able to kind of, when they go in a new direction, they go big. They always manage to kind of parlay these unexpected moves into big press. Matchup-wise, I mean, I think everybody expects the Rousey first-round armbar. Realistically, what kind of matchup does Liz have in her hands here, and what does she have to do to be competitive in this fight, much less win it, Danny?
She just has to be mean. Ronda Rousey is a very mean female fighter, and I think that's an expectation that doesn't come along with the division. And we've seen Liz Caramoche be in a title fight. She's been on the stage before. She lost to Marlos Conan via armbar, but she was very young in the sport. She was holding on a day job. She still holds down a day job. I mean, that's the nature of the uphill climb that she has ahead of her. But I think she realizes that she's going to make more for this fight than she probably has in her entire career previously. So the stakes are high for her, being that she's a Marine, being that she's focused, being that she has a flag that she's bearing, that she's really proud of with the lesbian, gay bisexual and transgender community. There's a lot at stake for Liz Caramush, and I don't think that she's a stepping stone by any means. You know, she's a veteran, and I think that she's probably one of the toughest competitors that Ronda's faced. People forget that Ronda Rousey has only been a professional mixed martial artist for about 18 months. I mean, she is her popularity really doesn't match up with the time that she's put into the sport, and that's just a testament to how good Ronda is as a personality, a character, and potentially a fighter for the sport.
You know, and I always think one of the things we have to remember is, like Brock Lesnar, in his rematch with Frank Mir. I mean, that was some of the most brutal ground and pound and top control we've ever seen. But as soon as Lesnar got hit, whether it was against Shane Carwin or later against Cain Velasquez, I think those grapplers and those guys that are really good at one discipline, I think we're going to see what Ronda Rousey's really made of when somebody can deny her takedowns or maybe just punish her on the way in, And that's, speaking of which, the one person that definitely is equipped to do that, Christian Santos, announced this week that she's signing with Invicta, the rival promotional, kind of rival to the UFC, that's all women. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a big win for Invicta, and what do you think the UFC is going to do? Eventually buy Invicta or wait how it plays out or what? Because that is the women's super fight, Dan.
It's a really intriguing situation. Dana White came out, said after UFC to Invicta and pay for her to be there, and Invicta was on board. This is all according to Dana White. But somehow, some way, Tito Ortiz and Cyborg's management said no and signed strictly with Invicta. So it seems weird that they would close that door with the UFC because I think it is a fight that fans want to see. I personally like that Cyborg is Invicta, and it's because I don't want to see people coming off steroid suspensions immediately return to the UFC into title fights or into number one contender fights. So this could serve as a nice middle ground for her to prove that she's clean, for her to, she's fighting a tough fighter in her fight in Invicta on April 5th. So I'm curious to see how this unfolds. I think that Cyborg definitely has her place in mixed martial arts when it comes to women because she was one of the torchbearers. She fought Gina Carano in the first ever headlining fight. At the same time, I think that it's a terrible situation for her because she's coming off the steroid suspension. I think that she could really hurt herself further image-wise, by having this falling out with the UFC and flirting with the relevancy in the sense that only hardcore fans are really going to care about her when she's had bigger platforms. And Invicta, I think, is a great organization, and hopefully they can make the most of having her name on their cards.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a, big fish in a small pond approach that, she's going to wrestle with. And I'll just be interested to see if the UFC waits for it to sort of metastasize and get bigger and bigger and bigger and then just swoop in and buy the promotion or do whatever, the 400-pound Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that waddles into town and squashes a promotion like Strikeforce or WFA or Pride or whatever and takes their stuff. But obviously that'll play out in some good stuff with women's MMA, really having a seminal moment here in the main event at 157. So moving on to the semi-main here, we got Lyoto Machida against Dan Henderson. Obviously some light heavyweight title implications. I like Machida in this bout, but how do you break this one down, Danny? Very interesting match.
Well, let me say that Lyoto Machida is the most difficult style matchup in all of mixed martial arts. When it comes to the 205 division, there have been a lot of guys who have said, I do not want to fight that guy. Right, Dan Henderson is not that guy. Dan Henderson will fight anybody. He's proven it in his 15 years in the sport, 16 years. I mean, Dan Henderson started when he was wearing wrestling shoes. He's a U.S. Olympian. He's fought, I believe, 16 champions in his career, and he's beat 10 of them. He's beat a few UFC future Hall of Famers. He's won in 185 pounds, at 205 pounds, and at heavyweight. The only thing Dan Henderson has never done in his career is win a UFC title. Right. And I think it's very important for him to maintain his number one contender position and be in the position to fight John Jones later in 2013. I think that Chael Sonnen is taking up a spot that belongs to Dan Henderson currently. I think it's an absolute travesty. It's criminally negligent that
I agree.
Sonnen is fighting when Dan Henderson could be in that fight on April 29th or 27th.
No, and I think it kind of is a UFC check in the box to get promotability for the latest season of the reality show. But if anything even happens in that fight where Sonnen is remotely competitive, I would bet against it. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's going to score a single takedown. He's going to get totally dominated and destroyed. and everybody will kind of roll their eyes and go, okay, I guess we bring up the winner of, Machida or Henderson. I think it's going to be a great fight, and I always like seeing Dan Henderson perform because the guy, he consistently brings it. Moving on to the third fight of the card, kind of an interesting one here, a replay of a match, 5, 6, 7 years ago in Canada. At 135 pounds, Uriah Faber and Ivan Menjivar rematch. And this is an interesting match because two guys kind of not quite in the twilight of their careers, but maybe heading towards it. Bit of a crossroads match. How do you break this one down, Danny?
It's a great fight. I think that Ivan Menjivar definitely deserves a chance to even up the score with Uriah Faber. I think for Uriah Faber, it's a fight where he faces a tough guy, a guy with a name, a guy who deserves to be in this position against a guy with Uriah Faber's name value. For Uriah Faber, it's how many great wins could he string together until the bantamweight division opens up for him to fight. With Renan Barão retaining this past Saturday, it was actually a horrible thing for Uriah Faber. If Michael McDonald got in there and took the interim belt, we could see Uriah Faber, Michael McDonald. We could see Uriah Faber getting closer to having that trilogy fight with Dominic Cruz, which is a big money fight, and I think it's a trilogy that could help establish the 135 division. So Uriah really just has to do what Uriah does and win those non-title fights. I mean, he's won every single non-title fight he's been in. He just loses title fight after title fight after title fight. So it's a tough spot for Uriah, but I think Ivan Menjivar is a step in the right direction because Ivan Menjivar is not someone who's going to let you walk all over him.
Right. What's your pick? I think Faber guts this one out in a decision.
I think he submits him. I think he's going to submit Ivan Menjivar, but I love the fight. I think it's a great card overall. UFC 157, even though I have a lot of issues with Dan Henderson being in the position that he's in, I think it's still a great fight. If he beats Lyoto Machida, he adds yet another champion to his legendary career, and hopefully maintains that position to be fighting John Jones later this year after he murders Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, and I think murder could be putting it lightly. I mean, hey, I know everything can happen. It's a fight, but I just think that I don't want to pay for that main event. That's the kind of one where I call 5 buddies up to pitch in $10. And wrapping up the rest of the card, interesting bout. Court McGee, a guy I've always been high on, dropping 170 pounds against Josh Neer. McGee was a huge middleweight. I don't even know how the guy gets down to 170. Same for Robbie Lawler, going back to 170 against Josh Koscheck. What are your picks in the McGee-Neer and the Lawler-Koscheck bouts?
I like Court McGee in this. I think he's going to have to be lighter. He's going to have to be quicker, and he's definitely going to maintain that size. I think Josh Neer is tough as it gets, but he's coming off a tough loss. He's no pushover, but I just think that Court McGee has a lot more upswing at this point. And with Josh Koscheck versus Robbie Lawler, I think no question Josh Koscheck's wrestling is going to make the difference. And Josh Koscheck has shown when he's facing a really dangerous striker with a lot of power like a Paul Daly, he's going to go out there and do what he does best, and that's wrestle. And don't count out Josh Koscheck standing because his kicks are far better than Robbie Lawler. So I love that fight. I think it's a great fight because we're seeing Josh Koscheck put in a really no-win situation, and let's see how he responds.
Right, and the tough thing about Koscheck, 170, he's kind of in, I always call it Rich Franklin territory after he'd been dominated twice by Anderson Silva. He's kind of just got to go out there and be a soldier and, and take on everybody that the UFC lines up for him with very little hope of getting a title shot in the near future. So, folks, we're glad to have you on board again, Danny. Where can fans send you questions and read some more of your work?
At Acosta's Legend on Twitter, also on Instagram, it's the same handle. And then check me out on thewoolverse.com. Not only do I do mixed martial arts there, but I do boxing, hip-hop, and general entertainment. MMAJunkie.com, USA Today Sports affiliate. I'm very honored to contribute there. And also Sirius 92 XM 208 for the Acosta KL on Sirius XM Fight Club every Tuesday at 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Also, don't forget iTunes, Amazon.com. Check out Once I Was a Champion, the Evan Tanner documentary. I was very honored to be a part of that. It's also on pay-per-view, so please check it out. It's a great documentary overall. Even if you're not a fan of the sport, it is absolutely a must-see. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Danny. Folks, you have questions, comments, concerns, and random Akira Shoji references, send them to us at twitter.com/MMA Talking Heads, and we will see you next week, Maniacs, on Talking Heads.